Greg Hunter, and this is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, September 23rd, 2011. Let's start off with the big honkin' meltdown that happened on Wall Street yesterday. Almost 400 points on the Dow Jones Industrial Averages. This problem's been brewing for a while. You remember earlier this week, the EU set up a $606 billion fund to try to stabilize the European Union. And Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner said it wasn't enough. 5 central banks are weighing in on this, including the European Central Bank, and $600 billion's too small? Wow! That's a big problem. On top of that, the IMF announced this week that they were going to make available $571 billion in a credit line. Let's see, that's almost $1.2 trillion. And then add the $400 billion that Ben Bernanke is going to move around on the balance sheet to buy the long end of the curve to suppress interest rates even further for mortgages. And wow, you got about $1.6 trillion to try to stop a slide, and it didn't stop it. Why? Well, maybe it wasn't enough money. Think about this. The 2008 meltdown caused the Federal Reserve, according to the GAO, Government Accountability Office, to print up $16 trillion and hand out to everybody. Foreign banks, domestic banks, foreign companies, domestic companies. The Fed bailed out the world. So $1.6 trillion that they're doing in this new meltdown is only 1/10 of that. And I think this meltdown is far worse because nothing was fixed. Banks have phony accounting, no public market for over-the-counter derivatives, no transparency, they're not writing down debt, nothing's fixed. So do you think this is going to be at least as big as the last meltdown? Whew, boy, I sure do. Christine Lagarde says that the debt is so big that, with households and with governments and with the banks, that it's smothering the global economy. People like George Soros, the billionaire investor, and also Nouriel Roubini, who is the professor of economics at NYU, they say we're already in a double-dip recession. What have I been telling you for months now? That we're headed for, already in, there is no recovery. Remember when the first bad news came out? It was transitory. It was temporary. It was a rough patch. No rough patch. We're not only in a recession, I think we're in a humdinger of a continuing depression. And I think when push comes to shove and things get really bad, listen, they're going to start printing money like crazy. I smell ink coming our way, and inflation is going to come with it. So the sell-off in precious metals today, and oil sold off pretty hard. Sold off $5 a barrel. Gold at one point was down pretty hard. I think all that stuff comes back when they start printing money to save their banker brethren. And just to tell you how bad the economy is unemployment benefits, for example, for another week hit over 400,000 people applying for unemployment benefits. And that's the other thing. On one side, we have this debt. On the other side, we have these declining tax receipts. People who are unemployed don't pay taxes. They collect benefits. And so with that kind of a situation, we could burn up this $2.4 trillion debt ceiling that we raised a while back pretty fast. It might not make it to the 2012 election, which is what President Obama wanted to do, did not want this issue to come up. And speaking of the debt ceiling, speaking of Congress trying to get our house in order, world leaders are asking the United States to get our house in order. Boy, it looks like a major gridlock is brewing in Congress, and also a possible government shutdown, according to Majority Leader in the Senate, Harry Reid. Now, of course, the Democrats are going to blame the Republicans. The Republicans are going to blame the Democrats. But then here's what we simply have. On one side, we have the Republicans who say, we want big cuts. We don't want to raise taxes. On the other side, you have the Democrats saying, we don't want big cuts to social programs, and we do want to raise taxes. And this is the same type of headbutting and gridlock scenario we had. And if they shut the government down, that will not be good for the economy, it will not be good for the U.S. dollar, and it will not be good for U.S. Treasury debt sales either. That's for sure. Let's bop over across the pond, over to the Mediterranean, to Muammar Gaddafi. He was supposed to be, out of the box by now. NATO flew, 20,000 sorties and Now we found out we have troops on the ground, American troops on the ground. Well, he's still hanging on, he and his supporters, and they're putting up quite a fight. Now, Obama says that his reign is over, and he's probably right. However, he's forced NATO to sign on for another 3 months. So he's hanging in there pretty tough. Now, I'm not on his side or anything, but remember when Barack Obama said that, oh, this is going to be measured in days, not weeks? Well, those days turned into weeks, and those weeks have turned into months, and I'll bet you those months will turn into years. Finally, Gallup poll out, 55% of people who were polled say they don't trust the mainstream media. They say that the mainstream media doesn't report stories accurately, they ignore stories, and they are biased. They don't report stories fairly. That was a big trick that I saw when I was working at the networks, was if they didn't like a story, they just ignored it, just decided not to do it. We're just not going to do it. Or they took it and they buried the story. That way they didn't really have to lie. They just didn't think it was newsworthy. Well, the days of the network sitting on, a mountain high saying, this is what the news is, those days are over with the internet. They are long over. And good riddance to those days. Thank you for supporting USAWatchdog.com. I'm Greg Hunter. Have a nice weekend.